What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. Okay, let's do a little thing we like to call the Middlekauff Mailbag at John Middlekauff, at John Middlekauff. Instagram, fire in those DMs. Get your questions answered here on the show. Very easy to get involved. Just fire in to those direct messages. Start with Andrew. Question for the bag. A lot of talk about the Chargers going out and bringing in a top receiver, such as Tyreek, Devontae, or Tee Higgins, or even drafting in one in the first round. While this is important to address, the offensive and defensive line need to continue to be fortified. In Mike Lombardi's book, Gridiron Genius, he talks about how Bill Walsh always believed that a wide receiver is the last position you address. This was in relation to the Niners drafting Jerry Rice in the mid-'80s, feeling as though he was the last piece. And they had already won. I think they had already won 2. So you just have to look at the guy running the show. Jim Harbaugh is not some guy that is going to break the bank for a wide receiver or trade a lot in terms of draft capital for one of these guys. It's just not going to happen. To me, they will continue to build the line of scrimmage and make their defense dominant. That doesn't mean he won't acquire offensive players. They drafted Ladd McConkey, who's a stud, in the second round. Like, to me, they will be all over a starting running back on the second day of the draft. That'll be something that interests them greatly. Do I picture them getting super aggressive and trading for Tyreek Hill? I just do not. I saw something on the internet of, like, could they trade for Mark Andrews? Like, I think they're going to be smart about the skill position guys. That is not how Jim Harbaugh has played. When he dominated with the Niners and when he won a national championship with Michigan, it was kicking your ass in the line of scrimmage. So I hear what you're saying. Fortify the line of scrimmage. That is what Jim Harbaugh does, believes in. So they don't need a tackle now, but they need more defensive linemen. Like, Bosa's probably not going to be on the team, and Khalil Mack is a free agent. So I wouldn't be worried about them doing something stupid when it comes to skill guys. Not saying that they won't take swings, but they're not going to operate like your typical team. I've been listening since the Bengals Super Bowl. It's a while now. How do you feel about the Bengals hiring Al Golden? I think he's going to be pretty good, but it's hard to imagine that he'll be a huge upgrade from Lou Anarumo. I had forgotten because I saw a clip of his press conference when he was hired, or maybe it was like an interview that he did with some Bengals employees, like in the media department. Was how he had coached. He was a linebacker coach there before he went to Notre Dame, so he's comfortable with Zach Taylor, the operation. He clearly is a good defensive coach, right? I mean, he was a huge, huge part of the Notre Dame operation the last couple of years. I mean, this year they were a defensive team. The big reason they were in the national championship was Al Golden. So I remember him when I lived in Philly. He was the head coach at Temple. I know he's really well thought of, but I'm with you. Like, it felt like, I don't know, injuries, letting guys walk out the door. Obviously, the defense early part of the season was atrocious in Cincinnati. I mean, it couldn't have been much worse. I mean, that one game where you blew. I mean, honestly, the difference of you being in the playoffs and you not being in the playoffs is the one loss to Baltimore where you blew 2 10-point leads in the fourth quarter. That game alone, like, you win that game, you win 10 games. And the defense was bad. But like a couple years ago, everyone thought Lou was a really good defensive coach. And everyone gives, where do you end up going? Indy? Everyone thinks, that's a great coach. That's a good hire by Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard. And I agree. I don't know, man. I think there aren't many good, there are good offensive coaches that have guys overachieve, right? Like Kevin O'Connell can make Sam Darnold look like a Pro Bowler. And maybe he is, maybe he's not, but like you get a lot of credit as an offensive coach. We've seen Kyle Shanahan do it with Garoppolo and Purdy. On defense, like Belichick became a legend coaching Lawrence Taylor. Dick LeBeau coached all those dudes with the Steelers, right? You usually become a high level defense. Think about some of the defensive guys that have been hired over the last decade. I saw the Niners get two guys hired, D'Amico and Saleh. Well, why'd they get hired? Their roster was loaded on defense. Loaded. When Vrabel got hired from Houston to uh, to the Texans, it was viewed like this guy just knows what he's doing. Even though I think the Texans actually that year had a bad statistically defensive year, so that might be a bad example. But my point is, you can't really be a good defensive coach unless you got dudes. It's usually not like, well, they had Middlekauff and this other dude named Billy who was kind of shitty at corner, and they had the best pass defense in the league. Like, it's not usually the way it works. Usually, the best defensive coordinators have sweet defensive players. I mean, look at Belichick even in New England with Flores and Patricia and Romeo Crennel. Think how many awesome defensive players they had over the years. From Seymour to Wilfork to Teddy Bruschi to Mike Vrabel to Rodney Harrison to Junior Seau when he was older to all the guys they had the last decade. Like, you got to have good defensive personnel. You can overcome it on offense with scheme. It's you can only go so far with scheme on defense. Like, it is a lot about how good the guys are. Big fan of the show. Started a movie podcast a few years back. Any suggestions to grow listeners or just overall do's and don'ts on the industry? Also, what's an underrated performance from an actor or actress in a movie? Thanks, John. Keep up the phenomenal work. Somehow I watched on YouTube recently, I watch a lot of mob content. So there was like this behind the scenes of the making of Goodfellas. And you're just realizing, like, now this isn't an underrated performance, but just how good De Niro, Liotta, and Pesci were in that movie. It's like, I just don't think it gets any better. And it turns out they all were good friends. Like, the the rapport they had on screen wasn't just because they were elite actors, and they were, but just that they really, really got along. I'd have to think about. I really don't. You know, the sad part is you get older, and I don't even have kids yet. I feel like I don't even watch that many movies anymore. And when I do, I find myself kind of disappointed. It's very rare that I watch a new movie that I go, that was good. Sometimes you just watch an old movie, you're like, that was sweet. I just want to relive this movie again. And it used to happen more probably like 20 years ago with DVDs. You would just pop in a DVD. And I've said this, the downfall of cable. The one good part about cable is you would just scroll and end up on random channels that I don't end up on anymore on YouTube TV. But I'm trying to think if I haven't really watched that many movies lately. I watched No Country for Old Men recently. I mean, that was phenomenal. I think Josh Brolin, is just an incredible actor. Sicario, that movie, he went on a heater there for a while. I would say, and the one the dude Goggins, who's in the new White Lotus, he was also in The Shield, which I think most people would argue is the greatest show ever produced by FX. And I've never watched it, though. I've been thinking about, like, if I'm bored, just start watching it because I've heard this is a good show. Justified, he's also in that. He's just good. Like, he's in something I'm just gonna watch. But I would say, like, I'm not doing this by myself, right? I have the power of Colin's distribution channel, which it's been a huge part of the growth of the podcast over the last 4 or 5 years. Obviously, YouTube is one area where you can get organic growth, right? It can just get you in front of people in terms of a search engine that other places cannot. I'm not on TikTok, not because I don't believe in its power. It's clearly huge. It was just I only have so much bandwidth. I'm not even that active on social media as much anymore. I try to stay away just for uh, I just feel I'm better at my job and more present in my life when I'm just not stuck on the phone. But I think, like, posting stuff on Twitter can only get you so far. And it's been like that for a long time now. Like, you're not going to grow organically on Twitter. Uh, Instagram, I think by far the best thing to do is everything you do as a podcast, do it as well on YouTube. because that's an area where you get organic growth. I don't think anything else matches that. Maybe like LinkedIn, honestly. Twitter does not. Um, Instagram does not. I can't even sign into Facebook if I wanted to. I've been locked out of that forever, and I can't speak to TikTok. But I would say YouTube would be an area where you got to get involved. The other thing is, and listen, I've done an independent podcast and had success and made some money. It is really, really, you can only go so far. And this is one thing I've learned as I've gotten older. Like, you need help. So, like, you can only do so much on your own. So, I mean, try and put as much effort and consistency doing podcasts every day, pumping out as much content as you can, um, and getting new things out consistently is huge. But like that, you can be good at it, and you can be consistent at it, and you can hit roadblocks, and it can like it might not even be your own fault. It's just because you can't get in front of other people's eyes or their ears. And there's nothing you can really do about that on your own. You need help from someone else. So, can you get even just a little known actor or people involved, a director or anyone involved in the movie industry to come on? That would be a recommendation. I don't know if you don't know anyone in the movie industry, but just start hitting them up on LinkedIn or DMs on Instagram and see if you can get them on as a guest. And maybe that leads to something. Mailbag question. Do coaches sign NDAs? I don't know why we don't see more coaches talk about what's going on behind the scenes. For example, I don't think Robert Saleh is a bad coach. I think he went to a team with no quarterback and an insane cuckoo owner. Why would Saleh not come into the press and essentially, in a professional manner, the Jets are insane and have terrible ownership, and then maybe open himself up to better job opportunities? The only thing I can think of is that he signed an NDA and can't say certain things in public. Well, all these people in the NFL are partners, right? So some owners are crazy, other owners are probably less crazy, but you can't be a billionaire and run an NFL team without just, being some things that most humans are not going to relate to. I mean, the only people that can relate to each other in the little fraternity there are in are the other owners. So if you come out and just completely shit on Woody Johnson, let's say Robert Saleh had come out and did a tell-all, like with the Athletic, like Mike Silver or Diana Rossini or whatever, Albert Breer, quote after quote after quote after quote. Where does that help him? Because if I was another owner, I'd go, listen, like, yeah, Woody's a little nuts, but what if I hired him and he doesn't like what he's doing here and he starts doing that to me? And he starts outing all the dirty laundry in our building. So it gets back to Robert Saleh and just people in general. And listen, I'd never signed an NDA when I worked in the NFL. I've never heard of that. And I got buddies that are GMs, and not saying it doesn't happen. I don't see what you get out of it, right? Like, what's the like? We all get it. Like everyone acknowledges. And listen, I is Robert Saleh a good head coach or not? I think the jury would be out. Is the Jets a tough place to function? 100%. Does Robert Saleh get the majority of the blame for the Jets? No. Rodgers gets a lot. Woody Johnson gets a lot. So I would say that I just don't even think you need to. Like, what's to be gained? Because you want to continue to do business with the other people that are sitting in that guy's seat. And if they think that you might do to them what you did to him, I'm not paying you millions of dollars. So I think that's it's like a calculated decision. It's just not worth it. I think a lot of people make those decisions when it comes to business. And you've had a scorned relationship with, and this is not even just football. I think a lot of people listening to this can relate. Is it worth it to make a stink over this? Or just like, I know what happened. People in my orbit know what happens, and we'll just move on. And I think there's a balancing act with that. And there's so much money on the line when you're someone like Robert Saleh. You're talking millions of dollars. I think the 49ers just made him like the highest paid coordinator in the league, or one of them. He's making like $4 or $5 million. So it's like, and he was interviewing with a bunch of other teams to be their head coach, which I don't know if happens if he comes out and goes scorched earth on the Jets, because it would scare other owners. So I really think it's more about all these guys have some similarities that way. And if you scare them off, like they're ultimately the ones with the money. Like this is not like Robert Saleh can't just become some entrepreneur, right? If he wants to be a football coach, he has to work for owners. That is the shitty part about the business they're in, which there are a lot of good things, right? The money, the fame, a lot comes with it. But if you want to coach football, especially in the pro level, you have to work for one of the 32 guys. That's your only options. Like if you want to do industry X, you pick it. You can go work for the biggest people in those industries, or you could try to do it on your own. Robert Saleh cannot. So I think that's a big reason. And listen, he's not alone. I mean, a lot of people go through crazy situations, but it's also why a lot of these stories that leaked about the Jets, like, pretty clear where they're coming from. Who's scoring big in the NBA this season? You are. With the all new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. From dunks to assists to rebounds, get behind your favorite player and the prop bets you can make on DraftKings, the home of NBA player props. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple, like picking how many points your favorite player will have. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook and make your first pick. First time? Here's something special just for you. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Take it to the rack with DraftKings Sportsbook. Every point counts. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Do you think Jason Kelce regrets retiring as early as he did and missing out on a Super Bowl ring? Does it diminish what impact he had for the Eagles if they were able to win without him? Well, they replaced him with, Landon Dickerson got a big contract. Now he's a guard, but he can also play center. And Cam Jurgens was drafted. Was he drafted in the second round or was he drafted in the third? Cam Jurgens was drafted in the second round. So, I mean, and was a Pro Bowler this year. I mean, the Eagles do a good job of drafting. Uh, they're probably one of the rare teams that could just have Fletcher Cox and Kelce retire and just have plug and play guys. And obviously, Jalen Carter at this point in time is better than Fletcher. Kelce's still pretty damn good. Kelce said last year it was his body. It just didn't work. So, do I think he would have retired if he thought his body could still function? I do not. Because while he makes a lot of money from podcasting, if you could make 15, $20 million playing for a really good team, you would continue to do that. But he said he was just in a lot of pain. So I think the reason that uh, that he retired had nothing to do with like on the fence about are we going to be good or are we going to be bad, and just more had to do with my body, and I'm in a lot of pain, and can I play with my little kids? And I think he talked about that last year. If you're Andrew Berry, the Browns GM, what's your order of importance? The number two draft pick, honoring Myles' trade request. What do you do with Deshaun Watson? Second mailbag question. In your opinion, can you rank the top 3 to 5 positions on a football team in order? Well, it's all about the draft selection number 2 in the middle of February is not as pressing of an issue as do we have to trade Myles Garrett? Right? Can we make him an offer over the next week in front of his agent at the combine that he would accept? Hey, we'll give you $150 million guaranteed. We don't want to trade you. Will you accept that offer? If he says no, I'm not going to take any of your money. This is not about the money. This is I don't want to play there anymore. That has to become your number one option. I did see some people saying, could they package Deshaun Watson for Myles Garrett? I don't think that's an option. I think you're just kind of stuck with Deshaun Watson. I don't really think that's an issue. Like, I just think you're stuck with him. So I think your only issues right now is what do we do with Myles Garrett? Do we trade him? And then if we do, Then we start focusing on the draft. Like Deshaun Watson's on our team, his Achilles doesn't work, and we just nothing we can do. I mean, I I think that's I don't think he is a he's a movable player. I would say quarterback. I would say tackle and edge, but it depends. Like, am I just getting a good edge player or am I getting TJ Watt or Myles Garrett? Am I getting a good tackle or am I getting Lane Johnson or Trent Williams? So, like, same thing with quarterback. If I get Trent Williams or Lane Johnson, or I get like the 18th best quarterback, it's all about where you need to pull the trigger. If you're talking about the draft, right? But I think it goes quarterback clear number one, 2A and 2B are pass rusher and tackle, and I would have corner number three. Question for the mailbag. What developed your ability in understanding football? Were you a player in high school or college? I'm interested in your journey. Sorry if you've already answered this. Have you thought about adding an option to join your YouTube channel for a monthly fee? I think there would be a lot of people that would support you and your fiance. um, yeah, I mean this is our monthly fee is the people we have associated with the podcast that pay a premium to advertise on the show. Um, if I was going to do some monthly fee, it wouldn't be through the YouTube channel. But I hear what you're saying. I would say my understanding of football was developed of working in football. I mean, when I worked at Fresno State for 2 years, I worked in recruiting and I worked with Pat Hill and Drew Hill. Well, Pat Hill had been a coach forever and had worked for Bill Belichick. So for a couple years, I think 3 or 4 years, he worked in Cleveland with Bill Belichick. He was the assistant offensive line coach. The offensive line coach was Kirk Ferentz. He drew the cards every day against Nick Saban running their defense. And then obviously when I got there in '08, he had ran a football program which had produced a ton of NFL guys for a decade. And Drew Hill has now been the player personnel director at Oklahoma under Bob Stoops, Lincoln Riley, and now Brett Venables. So I got to learn football from them. And then I took that knowledge to the NFL and I got to learn from all the guys I worked with, right? I mean, every day I worked with Howie and Lewis Riddick and Brett Veach, Mike Bradway, who's on Veach's staff, to our coaching staff, which included guys like Doug Peterson, Matt Nagy, Todd Bowles, Howard Mudd, uh, Sean McDermott. So I just got to be around all these guys, and you just, what do you think you do in a football office? You talk football. So you just, and then go into practice, being around players, you kind of learn. You just kind of learn. And then you've watched football your whole life, and I still watch football. So all that stuff is kind of my base, how I learned football in my 20s. And then over the last decade, I've my own thoughts on it. And then I just talk about it. So I guess that's long-winded way of saying I was taught. You can't learn this stuff, just by keeping your fingers crossed. I had to learn from being around other people, and I was lucky to be around people that knew what they were doing. Big NFL fan here from Morocco, living in Dubai. I've always wanted to go to Dubai. Wonder if I could convince Maria if we can go there for our honeymoon. I have a question regarding Kyle Shanahan. Is he on the hot seat now that Sirianni and McVay won? Especially Sirianni's team that beat the Chiefs. 49ers lost two Super Bowls to them. He gets tight every fourth quarter in the Super Bowl, and he lost if you include the Atlanta one as well. I have struggled with that one. I've never heard of a coordinator who gets blamed for a Super Bowl loss like he gets blamed. Like Pete Carroll gets blamed for Russell Wilson when he was not the offensive coordinator in that Super Bowl for them throwing on the goal line. They don't blame. I don't know who's their coordinator, Bevel or Schottenheimer. You never hear. It's just Pete Carroll, Pete Carroll, Pete Carroll. Yet somehow Dan Quinn does not get blamed. Kyle Shanahan does. But I hear what you're saying. I do think there's going to be tangible pressure on. I don't blame anyone if they don't have it in front of them, and I don't even have it in front of me. But I do know that their schedule this year, I remember when it came, is a joke. We don't know like exact dates, but the teams they're playing, they have a last place schedule. They play, I think the division plays the AFC South, which is obviously not good. So to me, anything less than like 11 or 12 wins for the 49ers is a complete disaster. And anytime you're paying a guy 15, 16, 17 million dollars to be your head coach, there's a lot of pressure on him. So I don't think he's on the hot seat because who are you going to fire him for? But is there pressure on Kyle Shanahan? Fuck yeah, there is. And there should be. It's like time to win. How is Bo Nix any different from Mac Jones? I guess he is more mobile, but doesn't he have the same qualities, but way more support? I think Bo Nix is way more talented than Mac Jones. Uh, Mobility, I mean, he's dramatically more mobile. And I think he's got a better arm. Part of the Mac Jones, um, I would say, package that I thought people were getting when they drafted him, because his comp was like a little bit more athletic. Kirk Cousins was like really serious guy. And it kind of came out like, yeah, I don't know if he's like his character, not bad, but no one's comparing him to like Tom Brady or Peyton Manning. I think that's really what he was going to hang his hat on. Was like this super focused, non fuck around guy, totally coachable, and like Belichick had issues with him. They couldn't stand him toward the end. So it's like, wait, you're not as talented, and your intangibles aren't elite. Like that's one thing with Bo Nix. His intangibles are pretty high. They're actually through the roof. And I think he's just physically more gifted than Mac Jones. Excellent show. I listen on Spotify. Can you put it out there that the Commanders need to focus on the O line for their team building this offseason? Most people will overlook this and say the defense needs to improve because the offense did so well. But there will absolutely be a regression next season when other defenses adjust to the Kingsbury game plan and discover Jalen's weaknesses, and another regression when Kingsbury ultimately leaves if they do not shore up their O line. The O line needs to be the priority. For God's sakes, do not let anyone say anything about team building with offensive skill positions. I think I read that you guys betting favorite to land Myles Garrett if he's traded. Uh, yeah, listen. Think about the team they're going up against. The team they're chasing in their division. Well, even if Sweat and Milton Williams leave, they're still going to have Nolan Smith, who's going to be a double-digit sack guy. Jalen Carter, who's one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL. Who will Howie probably draft this year? Probably another uh, defensive lineman. Who was one of the guys they drafted last year? I forget his name, but he was the guy that when Howie called him to say the Eagles were picking him, called him Big Pimpin'. I think that guy made some plays in the playoffs. He's a defensive tackle. So I hear you. Like if I have the quarterback, what did Harbaugh do for Justin Herbert? Offensive lineman. And what did he say? They're the tip of the spear. So I'm totally with you. I would draft O lineman and D lineman. If you told me they only draft O lineman and D lineman in this draft, I would say it was the right move. Question for the mailbag. How overstated is it when draft analysts say deep position groups mean some guys will fall later than their talent suggests? It feels like corner and interior D linemen were talked about that way last year, and there was a run on both to start the second round. Feels to me like it will happen this year with running back. I think what they mean is like if there wasn't depth at defensive tackle, right? If there were only three good defensive tackles, all the defensive tackles would be gone in the top 15 picks. Well, instead, people go, well, there's going to be 10 defensive tackles. I'm going to take the offensive tackle or the offensive, player or defensive end or whoever, just another position with the 11th pick, knowing I can get that same position, maybe a little bit less of a player, but a guy that can start for me at pick 42, whatever the numbers come out to be. I think that's more what when they are describing the scenario in which you are describing what they mean. But I hear you. Uh, no one actually knows, beside the top couple picks, who and where people are going to get drafted. No one has any clue, right? Because it doesn't. a GM or a coach doesn't help them at all to leak out to anybody, specifically the media, where and when they're going to take a player if they're drafting like sixth or eighth or 12th or 15th, who they like. And when we find out who you like, good teams take advantage of it because they jump you in the draft and they take that player if they want him. Just an observation. But over the last few years, it seems like defensive or CEO type coaches who focus more on culture and leadership are succeeding at a higher level than scheme guys and play caller types. Sirianni, Campbell, Quinn, D'Amico, Todd Bowles have all won playoff games, while coaches like Dayball, Mike McDaniel, Kevin O'Connell, Arthur Smith, Shane Steichen have zero playoff wins and are already being fired. The NFL is full of smart coaches and leadership seems like the important quality in a coach. Why are these young, hot offensive coordinator candidates always placed at the top of the list for coaching vacancies? Are teams looking for wrong qualities? Well, think about it. How, as a coordinator, do I judge your leadership ability? How? It's unquantifiable. Now you can argue you know it when I meet you or when I'm around you, but I don't have the ability to rank, like go to a stats page and get a ranking where I can go to a stats page and go, Shane Steichen led the best offense. Ben Johnson led the best offense. So and so led the best defense. So and so has the best passing offense. It's easy to quantify. Well, think who's interviewing them. An owner. Well, what's an owner's background? Typically business. Well, what do you do in business? Spreadsheets, numbers. It's very black and white. When you're dealing with coaches, especially CEO types, like, yeah, Mike Tomlin's got something no one else has. But how do I quantify that? And some people see it, some people don't. So I just think it's really complicated. I don't think there's, I don't know. I just don't think there's a great answer to um, the reason why these guys are not hired all the time. And those guys fail as well. Just because you're supposed to be the CEO head coach doesn't mean you're going to succeed. So I think it's like a draft pick. It is very, very difficult to figure out who's a good coach and who's not a good coach when they're an assistant, right? Because just because you're a great play caller does not mean that's going to translate to be a head coach. You use the example with Arthur Smith. Didn't translate. Shane Steichen, this year he was overwhelmed being a head coach. So I don't have a great answer for you besides it's really, really difficult. It is not easy. Sirianni benefits a lot. His owner has no owner spends more money, and he has the best GM in the league. Tyler from West Virginia, big fan, avid golfer, just broke 80 a couple times last year. Congrats, big accomplishment. I think the average golfer can't break 100. It's pretty obvious, big Packer fans, pretty obvious that they're a good team, but a few players away. Just wondering what you would do if you were Goody when it comes to free agency in the draft. We clearly need a wide receiver, pass rusher, maybe a corner, depending on the Alexander situation. Do we bring Devontae back? Draft another young wide receiver? Do we take a big swing on Crosby or Garrett? What you thinking? I would say historically, you guys have been, um, I wouldn't say against the big move, but it hasn't really been your MO as a franchise. So trading for Crosby, trading for Garrett feels like things Sean McVay, Andy Reid, Howie Roseman, the Niners. Like I have a hard time picturing the Green Bay Packers actually doing that. Uh, the Devontae situation, do you want to bring him back? I don't know. Sometimes, it's like you guys broke up for a reason. And I just think sometimes it's like it's over. There's no reason to try to take her back out on a date. Like it ended for the correct reasons. You guys pivoted off Aaron, off Devontae, and like now is a business. Can you get him back for cheap? Does Devontae think he's like a $20 million wide receiver? Will he play for like $5 million? If I were them, would I be all over Max Crosby or Myles Garrett? 100%. Could I see them doing that? I don't know, man. I, I'd be stunned if the Packers. I think they're going to sniff around, but do I envision those players if they do get traded on that team? It doesn't seem likely. So you guys do a lot of things at the margins. It's rare beside like Reggie White. Even when you got Charles Woodson, I'm pretty sure you got him for really cheap. He was coming off a weird year with the Raiders, and like how many big free agents have you guys signed over the last, I don't know, 20 years? Doesn't seem like that many. Maybe it changes with Gudikins uh, and LaFleur, younger, a little bit more aggressive, but that's not really the way the franchise has operated historically. Could the tush push become a special teams package for some teams? It's not like the Eagles surprise people with it. Why not dedicate a big Wildcat group for the guaranteed short yardage play? Well, the, the Bills tried it, and they have one of the strongest, biggest quarterbacks in the NFL, and it didn't work. What makes the Eagles unique is their quarterback can squat like 8 million pounds, and he can get really low. No one else can do that like they can. I don't love the play. I saw Jim Nance say he would be for them getting rid of the play. I agree. I would get rid of the play. Like, or I wouldn't have a problem if they outlawed the play. But I also don't have a problem like they play within the letter of the law and they have a unique player to run the play. No one else has that. No one does. Like, you think you're going to run that with like Bryce Young? Even when the Ravens were running it with Mark Andrews, he gets high. It's just a unique thing they can do because of Jalen. When evaluating college players post NIL, how important is it to take into account how they spend their money? Would you be more inclined to draft a guy who's less flashy with the spending? I don't. I had a buddy tell me this year that when you go into college parking lots, they look like his NFL teams with just, I mean, six-figure cars everywhere. Brand new, even the average cars are like a new Escalade or Tahoe or truck. These guys just because they spend who spends their money well at 20, 21 years old? Like how many guys are you meeting? Like, yeah, just invested everything in a SIP IRA, bought three multi units. It's like a ton of NFL guys are buying multiple Lamborghinis. It's like and like 17 watches. It's like, yeah, I don't know if those are the greatest purchases. I I think it matters more his football character, how much he loves the sport, how hard he works. You give any human being a lot of money at 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, college or pro, they're going to buy some things they regret 10 years later. 99% of men wouldn't be like, I nailed everything. Just great investor. It's like, yeah, I regret some of those. So I don't think it matters. I really don't. Unless you're like buying nefarious things, things that get you in trouble. But if you're just making purchases and who deems that? Like who gets to pick and choose what's a smart buy and what's not a smart buy? I think you kind of get into a slippery slope that way. As a diehard Titans fan, I'm stuck on deciding who I want to get. If you were the Titans' brand new front office, what the hell are you going to do with the first pick? Trade down? I'd take Abdul Carter. Period. Point blank. End of story. Abdul Carter. Here's the here you go, Raj. Here's the card. Say it out loud. Abdul Carter. I believe the gap between Trevor Lawrence's talent and how good he actually is wider than any quarterback in the league. He clearly has the potential to be better than he is. And I know you've mentioned this before, but do you really think it comes down to work ethic and lack of love of the game? For me as a football fan, or even if I was his coach, that would drive me nuts. I would rather root for someone or coach someone who sucks but loves the game. That is not true. Well, one, you can't suck and get to the NFL. But on the talent, um, I would say scale. If a guy has no talent, but he's like Rudy Rudiger, you have no chance to win in college or in the NFL. So there has to be some balance. I don't know enough about him. if he truly doesn't love football. Uh, Doug Peterson, who's a lifetime backup, position coach, head coach. I remember talking to him at the combine last year, loves him. I just don't think he's that good. So that's where I kind of disagree. I don't think he's that accurate. I don't think he's that instinctive. I think he turns the ball over at a rapid rate. Um, I don't know. I just think that I disagree on the talent gap. Right? I don't see this guy that's just oozing with talent. It's like, God, this guy is, could be Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. I don't see that when I watch the guy. Now, could it be better than he's playing? Of course. But when you watch him play over the last couple of years, do you go, yeah, this is a guy that could be a top five quarterback? I don't see that. No, I can't speak to, I don't think he's like showing up late. Uh, but does he does it mean everything to him deep down to his soul? Because that's what it means to Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, to Patrick Mahomes, to Peyton Manning, to Tom Brady, to Drew Brees. I'm bummed the Eagles lost Kellen Moore. But as you've said, this is the problem with Nick Sirianni. I've seen chatter that the Eagles should hire Frank Reich. He's not being pursued by other teams as a head coach, but could bring stability to the OC position for Philly. Yeah, I don't see that happening. I think they're going to end up elevating that dude Kevin on the staff. Seems like what the buzz is. And maybe they bring in Frank because that's Sirianni's guy. But I don't think Sirianni's going to be the offensive coordinator. Or excuse me, Frank's going to be the offensive coordinator. I haven't seen that anywhere. But I might not be as deep on the Eagles message boards as you are. Um, I would not do that. I would not hire Frank to be my offensive coordinator. No chance. What would the Falcons need to give up for Myles Garrett? Cousins would be an obvious piece to me, but what else would need to go with him? Well, to me, Cousins, he's not a tradable player because of his contract. So the Browns are not going to trade you Myles Garrett and take back his contract. They would just let you cut Kirk Cousins and then sign him for a couple million bucks. 5 million bucks, 10 million bucks. I do not see the Browns trading for Cousins. I think that would be insane. I think to get Myles Garrett, if you're the Browns, you cannot accept anything less than the starting point is two ones and a two. It's a starting point, and I would like more as well. But I do not think you can trade him for anything less than multiple ones. He's one of the best players in decades, like just talent wise, production wise. He's just an elite player at an elite position. So I just think it costs a shitload. And he's so good that even when you're getting offered a lot, you keep saying no and hanging up. I know you're not a big fan of the Falcons front office, but I have a Falcons question for you. What do you think of Ulbrich as the defensive coordinator? The Falcons D has been a bottom feeder since we fired Quinn. Even when we take swings on players that are successful with other teams, Judon, Simmons, etc., their play drops off when they get to Atlanta. The only explanation for that is coaching. Penix seems like he's going to be a top player and we already have a good offensive line. They need to take a page out of the Chiefs playbook and build a strong defense. Yeah, I mean, I remember last year when Kyle Shanahan was looking for a defensive coordinator, he tried to hire him, and Saleh kept him. I think he's always been highly thought of. Obviously, the Jets' defense was really good when he was the defensive coordinator before Saleh got fired. He was elevated to the interim coach. I followed his career since he was a player with the Niners, and then he became an assistant coach for Jim Mora on the UCLA staff. I've always been impressed with the guy, but I hear you. I mean, the one downfall of the Falcons is like, have you guys drafted that well? You guys just did some weird things recently, right? The Kyle Pitts thing blew up in your face. He's never come close to living up to a top five pick. The Cousins contract last year was a disaster. Obviously, if they could do it over again, they just would have given all that money to defensive players like Christian Wilkins and just drafted Penix in the first round and signed like a Gardner Minshew. I think they've just been an erratic organization. No way around it. Just a very, very erratic organization when it comes to player personnel. And they've been desperate for the quarterback situation post the end of Matt Ryan. They just feel like an organization that's kind of lost from my perspective. Just an organization that doesn't really know what they're doing. A lot of different opinions, not necessarily a shared vision, just kind of living in the moment and get a lot of average to below average results because of it. I mean, let's face it, this year was pretty embarrassing. The way everyone anointed them, the way they anointed themselves. And then the Buccaneers win the division. They didn't even make the playoffs. So got a lot of soul searching to do, but I hear you. They need to be good on defense. You have no chance to be a good team in the NFL if your defense isn't solid. And you can't rush the passer. When was the last time they could rush the passer? Like John Abraham? I mean, it's been a long, long time. Appreciate everyone listening. Adios.